Good afternoon. It's good to be here. This very, very sacred ground where our leader, Malcolm X al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, was martyred here on February 21st of 1965. Also, this center is named after Dr. Betty Shabazz, who is from the city of Detroit and who trained as a nurse and who went to Northern High School. And I had the honor of meeting Dr. Betty Shabazz in 1989 during a speaking engagement at the Shrine of the Black Madonna Church in the city of Detroit. I want to speak to you just briefly this afternoon on some aspects of our struggle that we've been waging in the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan over the last couple of years. It relates clearly to the struggle against repression, the struggle against national oppression and economic injustice. Now, this conference is being held at a critical juncture in the world movement against capitalism and imperialism. The only solution for the suffering and exploited masses of working and oppressed people is socialism. Our organizational and ideological efforts during this important period in history could determine the position we will occupy in this emerging phase of the class struggle, both domestically and internationally. With the limited time that we have to discuss and analyze our work in the state of Michigan, as well as around the country, it is essential that the case of political prisoner Reverend Edward Pinckney must be reviewed. Reverend Pinckney is a longtime fighter from the southwest region of Michigan, where the restructuring of capitalist production has rendered cities such as Benton Harbor, where he was based, and of course to the extreme poverty and exploitation that exists in so many other cities throughout the United States. Pinckney and his followers have been waging a monumental campaign against the racist impunity of the Berrien County court system. The previous imposition of emergency management, along with the gentrification of public areas and communities in the interests of private capital. In December of 2015, we held a national organizing conference to save the life of Reverend Pinckney, which was attended by people from several states throughout the U.S. The gathering pledged to intensify our work to prevent what Pinckney himself and others felt was a direct threat on his life. As a result of our work, some of the elements within Marquette Branch Prison, which is in the Upper Peninsula, were pushed back, and Pinckney has now been transferred to Muskegon, Michigan, much closer to his family and supporters. The plight of Reverend Pinckney is reflective of the racist nature of the justice system throughout the state of Michigan. Motions for bond pending appeal, the appeal itself, and other legal efforts were all denied by the Michigan state courts. This illustrates clearly that legal methods, although we utilize them, cannot be relied upon for the freedom of our fighters or to win any semblance of justice for the working class and the nationally oppressed. Nonetheless, there is resistance developing inside the prisons in Michigan and across the United States. A national strike was held just 2 months ago, and the level of consciousness among the imprisoned nation, as Mumia Abu-Jamal refers to it, is reaching new heights. In many ways, the situations inside the prisons represent increasing degrees of repression meted out to the masses by the capitalist system, which has exhausted any hope for a decent and productive life for growing numbers of people within the United States. I'd also like to talk about the failure of bourgeois democratic institutions here in the United States. 2.5 years ago, through the Moratorium Now Coalition to stop foreclosures, evictions, and utility shutoffs, one of the mass vehicles that we have established and have been working through now for nearly 9 years, as well as the Michigan Emergency Committee Against War and Injustice, MCOWI, we issued an appeal to the United Nations Commission for Human Rights at the height of the illegally imposed emergency management and forced bankruptcy of the city of Detroit and the majority of predominantly African-American municipalities throughout the state of Michigan. We, along with other organizations across the United States, as part of the United States Human Rights Network, addressed our appeal both directly to the United Nations Human Rights Commission in Geneva, as well as through the United States Human Rights Network, which is based here in the U.S., which annually participates in the United Nations Committee to Eliminate Racism and Discrimination, CERD, their entire review process. In a section of this appeal entitled, quote, "The Favoring of the Banks and the Corporations During the Bankruptcy Process," unquote, the document reads, and I quote, "It is the contention of the Moratorium Now Coalition in MCOWI that the egregious policies of the banks and the corporations are responsible for the underdevelopment and impoverishment of the city of Detroit. The targeting of Detroit and other majority African-American municipalities in the U.S. by the financial institutions has been well documented in numerous legal actions where financial institutions have agreed to pay billions of dollars in damages, not necessarily to the victims of such actions, but to the federal and state governments," unquote. This same report continues, noting that, quote, "Resources which should be utilized to keep people in their homes who have been subjected to predatory lending, as well as the payment of restitution and reparations to communities negatively and disproportionately affected by the actions of the unscrupulous banks, has now taken place. In the state of Michigan, over $500 million allocated through the so-called Hardest Hit program to assist distressed homeowners are not being utilized to prevent mortgage or tax foreclosures. These same funds, however, now are being utilized to identify homes to be torn down. Many of these houses and small businesses were abandoned as a direct result of the predatory actions of the banks. The Detroit Land Bank Authority has been established and is currently seizing thousands of homes and vacant lots without any consultation with residents of the affected neighborhoods in Detroit. Moreover, in disregard of the elementary civil rights that were ostensibly granted to African people in the aftermath of the Civil War, this same document that we submitted 2.5 years ago to the United Nations says, quote, "The 15th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, passed by an act of Congress in 1870, was designed to grant the right to vote to the former enslaved Africans. Despite the nullification of the statewide vote in December of 2012 against emergency management, the U.S. Justice Department and the White House are apparently collaborating with the state of Michigan officials by fostering the blatant violation of the 15th Amendment, along with the Civil Rights Acts of 1957, Civil Rights Act of 1964, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, unquote. We also noted for the record, submitted to the United Nations Human Rights Commission, stressing, quote, "An appeal to the United States Attorney General, former Attorney General Eric Holder, in 2013 by several elected political officials requesting the intervention of the federal government and reviewing the denial of the right to vote and due process as protected under the 14th and the 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution and other acts of Congress, including the civil rights and voting rights laws, has gone unanswered. In addition to the legal brief submitted to the Federal Bankruptcy Court by the Obama administration in 2014, supported the imposition of emergency management and forced bankruptcy of Detroit. The administration has endorsed the privatization of the administration of federal grants, which had been previously handled by the City of Detroit Department and employees. The expropriation of these federal grants from the City of Detroit and turning them over to private foundations located outside the city has resulted in the termination of employees and departments that previously administered such grants, where employees paid into their pension systems. These, of course, came under attack during the bankruptcy, and of course it has been devastating to long-term employees of the city of Detroit, unquote. In light of these excesses carried out against the people of Detroit and the state of Michigan, the Democratic Party had the audacity to campaign among the masses of our people, requesting that they go out and vote en masse for their candidates seeking election as president and vice president recently in a national poll that was held on November 8th. Under such conditions, the people, now based upon their own experiences, that there are no fundamental differences between the Democratic and the Republican parties. Comrades, friends, brothers and sisters, we need a party of the working class and the oppressed that can speak in its own name and can organize for the total overthrow of the racist, capitalist, and imperialist system, for the realization of national liberation and socialism. In conclusion, over the last 2 years, we have been waging a monumental struggle against massive tax foreclosures and water shutoffs in the city of Detroit. Tens of thousands of households have had their water services terminated. Through our coalition efforts, we have forced the Wayne County Treasurer's Office to enact several moratoriums on property tax foreclosures, which are a direct result of the predatory actions of the banks. Tens of thousands have been allowed to make payment arrangements on these usurious tax assessments, which are themselves illegal. Based upon our efforts now, in the last several weeks, the Michigan ACLU, the NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, and other entities have filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of the victims of property tax foreclosures aimed at winning a moratorium through the courts on property tax foreclosures, noting that these state actions are a violation of the 1968 Fair Housing Act. We are demanding that the hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funds be utilized for their intended purposes, which is to keep people in their homes through the payment of delinquent property taxes and inflated water bills. We have forced an upcoming meeting with the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, demanding that they rewrite the regulations for allocating funds in Detroit and Wayne County for the aforementioned purposes. The corruption inside the Detroit Land Bank Authority and the Comprador-Dugan City Administration in Detroit is an open book for all to see at this point. Finally, we will continue our efforts aimed at building a revolutionary response to national oppression, to the rapacious capitalist system at the upcoming March 25th, 2017 Midwest Party Conference that will be held in Detroit. And we want to invite everyone here to come to Detroit to see for yourself what capitalism has done to the United States. Next year, 2017, represents the 50th anniversary of the heroic African-American working class rebellion in Detroit. It is up to us to rewrite our own history, to learn from the historical and heroic experiences of the working class in this country. It is imperative that the actual history of these important struggles be told from the perspective of the people. Thank you so much for your attention. Long live Workers' World Party. Long live the revolutionary class struggle of the working class and the oppressed. Let's organize. Let's build a revolutionary struggle. Thank you so much.